Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson, and you're listening to the Diesel Performance Podcast. Guys, we made it through Black Friday. Thank you so much to all of the podcast listeners who reached out to us during the sale and got some new products and some new upgrades for your truck. I know the team is just getting their head above water with getting all those orders shipped out to everyone. Just again, a huge thank you to everybody who called in and participated in the sale. We really appreciate it. December, we have some exciting stuff going on. So in the shop, there's been a program in the background, and we've even released a couple of teaser videos or post about this as well. But we're going to be working on a brand new boost tester kit. This isn't a kit like you've ever seen before. It's not PVC and a valve. This is a legit regulator system, CNC machined plates that bolt directly onto the turbo or into the turbo system. They're going to be nothing like any boost test kit you've ever seen before. They're going to work so awesome. You guys are definitely going to be into them. I have a lot of details coming out about those in the coming weeks. Also, just wanted to give a quick heads up. Everybody who's in our Facebook group, Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast, I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. I love seeing all of the great posts, all of the activity, and guys helping each other. So if you have questions about your truck, that's a great place to go and get help. Hey, if you're a Canadian, you probably want to be a part of a group that's a little bit more specific to you. We also are saying if you're a Canadian and you're a listener, I know there's a lot of you out there, go join the Canadian diesel community group. That's an awesome group. It's just specifically for our friends north of the border. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Byron Sador from Trucks of Ontario page, Jim McNichol, who's our independent rep from Calibrated Power, is on there. There's all sorts of big names. Everybody who has a big 4-digit truck in Canada is quickly going and jumping into that Facebook group. So there's a lot of cool shit to see. Another really good resource that's a little bit more local for our Canadian listeners. So definitely make sure you guys take advantage of that and jump in there. For today, we are going to talk a little bit about Exergy Performance. We're going to talk a little bit about WC Fab, who of course sponsor the show and make all of this possible. Big announcement. I have Jason Worley coming on the show himself next week. We are going to dive deep into a sled pull build. We're going to talk about WC Fab product releases, a little bit about their 10-year anniversary, and a lot about what to expect from them in 2021. From Exergy Performance, again, I want to remind everybody, they just released fuel additive. These are the guys who know the most out of anybody I've ever talked to about high pressure common rail diesel fuel systems. And now they have developed, over years of time, by the way, they have now developed an additive. If there was somebody I was going to trust to know about what additives to run with common rail diesel fuel systems, it would be the guys at Exergy. So I can't say enough good about that, guys. We're really stoked about it. I'm actually going to try to get myself a couple gallons of it here and run it in my vehicle over the winter. And we're going to test out their winter blend, and I'll be reporting back some updates along the way throughout the cold months. I wanted to get through all of that kind of quickly because I'm really excited for today's guest. We know that we have a lot of 4th and 5th gen Dodge guys listening. We talk a lot about 68 RFEs in our Facebook groups and on our Facebook page answering questions. I thought, hey man, it's time to bring on an expert and get somebody on here who actually knows what they're talking about. That's why we got Frank from RevMax. Frank, how the hell are you?
I'm good, man. Glad to be on the show, and thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Frank, I wanted to bring you onto the show, and I know you've been on the show before. I think we've talked at UCC, and I think we've talked a few times in between there. You're somebody who is well known within the industry to be an expert around the 68 RFEs. Can you just give maybe some of our newer listeners a little bit of your background in diesel?
Yeah. So I've been in the diesel industry since about 2009. I started building our first 68s about 2010. And along the line since there, we had our race truck, which we still have, which I got to dust the weeds off of and the cobwebs off of here. But UCC kind of got a little kick to the side last year. Luckily for us, the truck wasn't quite ready yet, so it was okay. But now it's going to be a race to see if we can get it done in time for this year, assuming it happens. But along the way, we've done a lot of really cool things with the 68, and honestly, we've taken it places where I never thought I could go, and it's just been a really cool journey to where we've gotten and all the products we've released, and we've learned so much along the way. And even today, every single day, we learned something new about the 60 RV. So it is truly a unique bird, and it has its flaws, of course, but it also gets a bad rap. It's a great unit for a stock truck, but this group we're talking with, it's not you guys. So of course you guys hate it, but you leave that thing in a stock truck, and the thing will go a couple 100,000 miles, but turn that power up just a little bit, it's gone pretty quick. So like I said, even just look at the power levels the stock trucks are today. That was a tuned truck, 8-9 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Now that's coming out of the factory that way. And people are wondering why there's nothing left and why they break if you add 50 horsepower. The factory added the 50 horsepower for you already.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the tough thing to wrap your head around, right? Because the engine and the fuel systems have advanced so far, and transmission technology in some of Dodge's competitors has started to advance pretty far as well. But man, you guys at RevMax, you really just wanted to grab the one that was the biggest pain in the ass for everyone and tackle it. I'm really glad you have, because I know the question I get nowadays is, I'm thinking about buying a new Cummins, and I'm looking at that 1,000 foot-pounds out of that ASIN, or getting a little bit like standard output and losing a little bit of that torque, but going with the 68. Now, personally, I recommend to guys like, hey, if you're going to leave the truck tune only, and all you're ever going to do is put a tune on it, the ASIN's a good trans. I got no hard complaints about it. But if you ever want to turn the power up in the truck, if you ever want to do a turbo upgrade, if you ever want to go drag racing, sled pulling, having fun, well, you probably want to do the 68 and then put some investments into it. Would you say that's a pretty fair piece of advice for guys getting into these trucks?
I'd say that's a dead on the money, what you just said there. We echo the same things on our calls when customers, we get a call or an email a day about this. If you're going to work your truck really hard and you're going to be towing super heavy with it all the time, you're better off, a stock, honestly, leaving the truck stock is probably your best option. It's going to last the longest. Now, it's going to be the fastest or it's not, but it's going to work. It's going to be a work truck. And that's the truck you're looking for, and you're just looking for a little small tune on top of it, then AS69 absolutely, hands down, is the way I would want to go if I was optioning one of these trucks out. Now, if you want to go crazy with it, and what I mean crazy is if you're going to be doing any fuel or you're going to be doing turbo upgrade at that point, you're going to start running into some brick walls that you're not going to be able to break through an AS69. Take it from us. 2 years ago, we had this great idea. Last second, our truck wasn't ready yet, our white truck, our 68 truck. So we went out and bought another truck, an AS69 truck. And I think that truck laid out, I think it was like 1,300 horse at UCC a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But we didn't have time to mess with tuning with it. It was kind of last second we threw it together. And even now, we got rid of the truck maybe 6 or 8 months ago. And I'll tell you, no matter what we did with that truck, we can never make it shift right. And it had nothing to do with the trans. It was purely in the tuning side. They just don't do well with power. Yeah. And it sucks because, the guts of that trans, its predecessor, the AS68, in our opinion here, is the worst diesel trans ever built. Put it on it, ever. Worse than we're talking worse than an E4OD or a 40100 back in the day. Okay,
that's a big claim.
junk, garbage. Okay, and the AS69, while it has the exact same layout internally, a lot of those flaws are fixed. And as far as clutch capacity, we've got all the clutch capacity in the world in those units now available. The problem is the way the valve body is designed, the way the solenoids work in that valve body, and the tuners, they've tried to get in there. No one's been able to fully tune one of those. If you pull the torque management off it, it won't shift. So, and they've already been out. We're going on year number 8 right now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever anything for them. So yeah, if you want to go a little faster, you're going to want the 68. It's hard to believe you want the lighter duty training, but you do because you invest some money into it. You can have a trans that can hold some serious power. Is it going to hold 1,500 horsepower? It's not. Forget the stuff you see on the internet, okay, about this. Someone has like us with our 68, or there's a couple other ones out there, in the 1,500 horse range. Yeah. Listen, you can do it for a weekend. You saw us at UCC. We drove that truck back and forth to UCC. We dragged it probably 10 or 12 times. We ran a 10, I think it's like a 10-2 pass on that thing. we dynoed, I don't know, 12 or I think it was like around 1,200 horse. So that particular day in the dyno, we turned it down a little bit. And we sled pulled with it and we drove it back home. But listen, you're not going to be able to do that for 6 weeks in a row. It's not going to happen. And that's what people are expecting. It's just not going to happen. So as long as you have reasonable goals, you can drive your truck reasonably, a 60 RFE will do the job. Now, will it do the job as well as, say, a 48 swap? Well, it'll be a lot more drivable than a 48 swap, but it won't hold up the same way a 48 swap will hold up. But we could take it a step farther than that. A 48 won't handle what a Turbo 400 will hold up to.
Sure.
So you're seeing the progression in time now. People used to take go to 48. Well, now the people at 48, they realize that 48 can't hold up anymore. So what do they go back to? They go back to a 3-speed. They go back to a Turbo 400 from 1960s.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's where we're at. People are starting to, the diesel world, for some reason, was very hard. It was hard for them to understand that, keeping the trans that was in there in a drag truck versus going back to some old school 2-speed or 3-speed unit, you're never going to beat the dinosaur. That old dinosaur can shift so fast because it's all mechanical. It can hold a ton of power again because it's all mechanical. So all the people who say, oh, I can build a 68 that'll hold 1,500 horsepower, or the people that say I can build a 48 RE that can hold 1,500 horsepower. Yeah, we all can, but it's not going to last that long. Okay. It's not bulletproof. There's no such thing. And if there's one thing that really upsets me about the industry, the transmission side of the industry, is this word bulletproof or indestructible.
Yeah.
Anyone who advertises the unit as being bulletproof or indestructible, or they've never had one fail, is not telling you the truth. It's not the way it is.
Or not selling enough to have had dealt with that. Like, sure, if you only sell upgrades to stock guys who are towing horse trailers, it's pretty easy to have that moniker, right? But if you're going to have guys who are going to go out and go compete and guys who are going to have record-setting trucks, it's not rocket science. I mean, listen, with like being a Duramax fan, the Allison is plagued by a certain limit as well. I mean, I don't care how much you love a 5-speed Allison or a 6-speed Allison. The handful of guys in the country who have run consistent sub 9-second quarter mile passes or sub 7-second passes, in 1/8 mile passes, they don't last. Like they'll tell you themselves, like that even the Allison, like around that same horsepower, 1,500 horsepower, just not going to put it together. Like, of course you're going to go back to less gears and mechanical functionality. But I think these newer transmissions, and now we're starting to see it everywhere where we're getting more and more gears, but even in the 68, there's a lot of benefits to having that. And I think you hit on that really well, Frank, about like having a daily driver truck, having a truck that's not just a competition dedicated drag only truck. Like if I'm talking about my average guy and he wants to do a turbo, maybe a tuner or a tuner and maybe a turbo, and he knows he's going to have to build his trans because he wants to, have some fun with it now and again. What is that guy looking at? Like what are the shortfalls of a stock 68 RFE?
Well, that guy, that's a 99% guy right there, who we're talking about. All right. Yeah. The ones we start talking about are the 1%, right? So let's go to talk to the general guy out there who he's tuned his truck a little bit. Maybe he's got some bigger tires on it. What does he need to do to make it? I'm assuming you're asking, what does he need to do to make that thing last?
Yeah.
And it's all about when you do it, not versus what you do to it. Okay. If you wait 6 months, a year, or 2 years, or 10,000 versus 50,000 miles before you do your upgrades, it's not going to last. Okay. Because once those clutches get hot spotted, and once you've got that wear in that trans, there's no wonder fluid, okay, or miraculous water, okay, that you can sprinkle on your truck that's going to make that trans go back to where it was before. So the key is prevention, not treatment. Okay. If we try to treat the issue, it's usually too late. All right. And your results you get from the treatment are going to be not that great. If we prevent the issue, you're going to have a trans that's going to last a long time. So there's some really, really simple things that we can do to these trucks. And we'll go over a few of them just to make them last. So if you're just a normal tune guy, There's a few things. Number one, the spin-on filter in these trucks likes to come off. It's held on by a piece of plastic inside. Upgrade the little screw inside there next time you do an oil change. It's $19. Easy. That thing pops off, there goes your trans. So there's $19, okay? That can save you trans. Next thing, the 10 and newer trucks, specifically the 13 and newer trucks, they've got a thermostatically actuated cooling system. So until that trans heats up, there's no cooler flow to the transmission itself. It's actually blocked off. And when it heats up, the thermostat opens up just like in your radiator, and then the trans fluid is then being cooled. Well, that valve can stick. It sticks a lot, actually. And when that goes bad, there goes your trans with it. Those trucks are usually running around the 190 range, 185 to 200 range stock. You put one of the bypasses in there, you're looking at 150 degree range. That's great, but the real thing you're saving yourself from is that valve sticking. So doing that, so there's let's say $100 right there. That's a huge thing you can do to your truck. And again, when you're doing next time you do your fluid change, just do that at the same time. You're already gonna be oily and dirty. Just throw that in there real quick.
Yeah.
And then the biggest thing you could probably do for a 68 specifically now would be to do a valve body. As long as you've got trans, now the key to the valve body is you got to have the trans tuning to go with the valve body. Okay. So think about the whole product as JB Weld. You've got an A and a B chemical. Okay. If you just use the A of the JB Weld, nothing happens. Or if you just use the B, nothing happens. So what I'm trying to get at here is if you put a valve body in a truck that has no trans tuning, no elevated line pressure, nothing like that, you're going to get zero out of that valve body. And the same thing on the trans tune. If you put a trans tune in that requires more line pressure, without the valve body go with it, you're not making the line pressure. So you're not going to get anything out of it. So the two of those things go together hand in hand. So what I would recommend, if I was buying a brand new truck or I just bought a truck from somebody or whatever your circumstances may be, I would do a nice tune, but with good trans tuning is key, with a valve body, a filter screw, and a thermostat bypass. And that's a really good foundation to keep your truck alive for a while. Now, is that going to help a 650 horsepower truck? No. Okay. But it will help your general purpose, everyday driver. Sure. Once you get to those bigger numbers, there's other internal issues in the trans that you have to be taken care of. There's just not enough capacity in there.
I want to dive into that, but real fast, I want to circle back on something. So the valve body, what is it about the stock valve body that's lacking? And what is it about a modified valve body? Like what gets improved?
Okay, several things. So in a 68, there's a lot of little things. The solenoid switch valve on a stock 68, they will wear out over time. So again, if you've got a truck with a bunch of mileage on it, you're going to want to get a valve body that's got an upgraded solenoid switch valve. Besides that, the next thing that's going to be an issue is the accumulator plate on the side. That plate will blow off on the outside of it. Very, very common. There'll be a line pressure spike. It'll blow that plate off the side of it. So that is, when we do a valve body here, our plates have additional holes, additional fasteners, different grade fastener, longer bolt, more threads on there. All that's taken care of. The accumulators behind that accumulator plate, the factory ones, are notorious for cracking and leaking. So when we do a valve body here, you've got what we call our triple-double design, which is we've got a total of 3 rings in there. 2 are active, 1's a guide. So that keeps any leakage, that getting around the accumulator. It's keeping it now in behind the accumulator, just like a piston, no different. You don't want blow by. And if you've got the factory design, you will get blow by. Then the next issues on those valve bodies, it's a large valve body. And if you've ever taken one apart, you'll notice that there's nothing on the separator plate. It's just a piece of stamped metal. And that stamped metal goes between 2 aluminum halves. And over time, those aluminum halves just rub and move a little bit with every heat cycle. And before you know it, you've got warpage in that valve body, and you've got cross-leaking in that valve body. So there's a couple ways to combat that, one of which is something we came up many, many, many years ago, like probably a decade ago now, which is our bonded separator plate. It's got a gasket now on both sides of it. So when you torque down your valve body bolts, it gets an impression into that valve body separator plate now, 100% seal, no leakage. And then one of the other things that we came out with before UCC, before I think one of the last times we talked, when we had, when we had that 10-second pass on that 68, was our billet valve body. So the billet channel plate valve body, we came out with that, I think back in 2000, I think it was maybe 2015 or 16, if I'm not mistaken. That's huge. So the factory has a very cheaply cast backside of the valve body, on the bottom side of the valve body. And again, that flexes and warps like crazy in cross leaks. Well, we designed a billet 6061 version of that that's thicker. And because it's thicker, it resists that movement that the factory one is notorious to, to twist and to move and eventually warp. With the new valve bodies, with the channel plate on there, our billet channel plate, all that's gone, along with all the other things we talked about. That's what's giving you the performance advantage, along with revised orifices, which are changing fluid flows, which will then give you the additional line pressure that the tuner is calling for in the transmission tune. Gotcha.
Okay. So quite a bit. It's kind of, I don't want to call it like a redesign, but it kind of seems like one of those things where you guys have RevMax and has gone through it and said, okay, here's all the things that need to be changed on it. Here's all of these little adjustments or these seemingly innocuous improvements, and they all kind of add together to be something that really matters.
That's correct.
Okay. I like that. All right. Now, so we got a valve body, we got some of our other basic quick fixes, but like you said, we do still got guys who are going to throw big fuel systems and going to throw big single turbos or big compound setups on these trucks, and they want to go have some fun with them. Maybe it's a street truck, or somebody who wants to get into DPC next year. Who knows? Where do we go from here? What's the next weak link after I've upgraded the valve body?
Your next weak link is going to be the overdrive clutch in the transmission. And the only way to solve that problem is, of course, during an overhaul. We've got several levels. We've got our 700 series. We've got an 850 series. We've got our 1000, and we've got a 12XR now. Again, the 12XR and the 1000, those are just now coming out. We've been testing those for about the past year and a half or so. To give you an example of how much more capacity we're talking, a factory 60 RFE in the overdrive clutch has a total of 12 plates in it. The 12XR has 20 plates in it.
Oh, wow.
The truck we did UCC with several times, that was 16 plates. So we've gone way past that point. But in order to run that kind of capacity, it does require different center support. It requires a different input clutch drum. It requires a different billet overdrive clutch hub. And all these things, you can't do any of that without all of it. You've got to have it all. So as you start getting up to these upper echelon power level wise, 800, 900, 1,000 horse trucks, it's going to cost a lot of money. There's a lot of parts that go into one of these units. I mean, you've got a Mar-aging input shaft that's got to go into it. You've got the billet pump body that's got to go into it. There's so much stuff that, 500 here, 600 here, 300 there. Before you know it, you've got $12,000-13,000 in the training. That's just unfortunately the way it goes with the 68.
Yeah, man. The price tag around performance always kind of feels like a kick in the shins. But I'll tell you what, on those, any Dodge Trans, if we're just being honest, always feels like a kick in the nuts. It could just get brutal real fast,
Yeah, for sure. And you look at an Allison. Well, I could build my Allison so cheap. Well, listen, your Allison's got gigantic parts in it to start with. Okay, yeah. So it's not very difficult to build an Allison, the hard parts are not intensive. So your craziest Allison build, all you're going to have is an input, an intermediate, and an output shaft. That's all you're going to have, plus clutches. A 68. Well, let's go to a 47 for a second. To hold any real horsepower on a 47, you're talking about a fat shaft input, a different converter, a different pump stator, different direct drum, servos, levers, all that. Your input shaft, intermediate shaft, output shaft, all that has to be changed out. And on 68, you've got to do all that plus some. You've got to do, again, your input shaft, your intermediate / overdrive hub / shaft, as we call it here. You got to do something about your pump. You got to do something about your input clutch hub, your input clutch drum, your center support, your valve body, your converter. it's just there's more pieces you got to replace. The parts, the guts are just not as big to start with. It's like a big lever. Your lever is smaller on a 68 than it is on an Allison or a Ford 6R140. You've got to really spend a lot of money re-engineering and replacing those small levers, with more clutch surface area.
Yeah. But when you're done, you got something that is indestructible, right? Isn't that what you said?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, you'll never have an issue again. No, I want to make it very clear. There's no such thing again as an indestructible transmission. I laugh. You watch Street Outlaws and stuff on TV. What's the first thing that breaks on every one of those cars? Almost every time.
Yeah, it's always
transmission.
Yeah.
Always transmission, torque converter, always. So, and those are Turbo 400, Pro Mod Turbo 400s, and Power Glides in those things. The most basic dinosaur transmission ever. And those cars literally drive an eighth mile. Okay. They don't drive 80,000 miles a year and then go drag race, 30 times a year and expect it to go then tow a 20,000 pound trailer behind it. The things that we are asking these trucks to do that they actually do pretty well even is unbelievable. Think about what people are doing with these trucks. They are towing, fifth wheels, 15, 18,000 pound fifth wheels behind them. They're turned up to 700 horsepower. Then on 37s, and then they go to the drag strip and do four-wheel drive launches and run, a fast eighth mile or quarter mile pass, and then they hook back up, take their fifth wheeler back home.
Yeah.
Try that with a Pro Mod car. See how that goes. See how far you make it. You won't make it around the corner. So when people get upset about 68s and that stuff failing, you got to be reasonable, and you really have to look at what these things are actually doing. Yeah. I mean, it's impressive. It's really, and the other thing is, you look at the Hellcats and you look at, some of the Mercedes AMG cars and some of these other really strong automatic, transmission vehicles. And there's something that has always been kind of an annoyance in the diesel world, but it's always been there, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. On these other cars, the only reason why an 8 HP Trans and a Hellcat or Demon can run, hold that kind of power is torque management. They are defueling that thing like crazy in the shifts and then bringing it back on, or retarding the spark on those shifts and bringing it back on once the next gear is engaged. If you pulled all the torque management out of those cars and let them go, they're not going to make it one pass down the track. Gone. And what we see 99% of the time with diesel tunes, unfortunately, is that torque management is taken out. So it's no wonder why your Trans is gone. But here's the deal. And the reason why that's happened is because the general public has demanded it from their tuner. They don't like that pause.
Yeah.
Shift, pause, go. Shift, pause, go. The shift, pause, go is what keeps the Trans alive. If you have a perfect power, that with no drop off in between, that means either your spark or your fuel, is basically not being pulled back. That Trans is seeing every bit of that power in that shift, where in the factory design, again, with factory power levels, it's being pulled back. It's being pulled back for a reason. It can't take it.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because we've seen other cars go to like CVVT Transes and things of that nature, and I don't want that out of my truck. I like a gear. I don't mind it shift. Like I never understood. I do understand wanting a quicker shift, right? So for the competition guys, like saying I want a quicker shift, I get it. I've driven trucks like an Allison right after you flash it and it's going through trans learning, and like the defuel is dramatic. Like the whole truck falls on its face and comes back up. I don't like that. I've been to sled pulls. Sled pulls is one where I could think like guys always want no defuel because they want it to just pop through the gears, right? Because you have so much load on the truck. If it defuels at all, you've just lost the sled pull. But again, I'm right there with you, man. Like for normal driving, and I drive like a dick, where I'm real aggressive. I'm every stoplight is a race light. I get that, but like I'd rather have it defuel for a second so it could shift and I could make it to where I'm going than have to get towed, because that's going to take a lot longer.
Yes, exactly, and that is, I think that the public needs education. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of this industry has been built off of misinformation and ignorance, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I want to do this. Well, here you go. And then that guy goes, oh, that felt really good. Well, then, a month later, the first guy's transit toast, and he's pissed at the guy who built him a tranny, and it just goes on and on and on. But it goes back to, we started with something flawed, and we just kicked the can down the road, and it's just gotten worse. And this goes back to actually to our first thing we started about our conversation today, AS69 versus 68 RFE. Guess what the AS69 does on its shifts that people hate? It defuels. Yeah. It stops. It just stops. But guess what? That's why the trans will go 300,000 miles. It says, I don't care what you want me to do. This is what I'm going to do because this is how it should be done. As soon as you pull those defuels out, it's not going to be good. Trust me. I know. But, so that's where it all comes into play. People don't like the ASIN because it defuels.
Yeah.
But they also like the ASIN because it's so much stronger. Leave the 60. Remember we talked about it also. If the 68 was stock and the truck was stock, it'd last a long, long time. You'd have defueling there, and you'd have the power level was designed for. You take one of those two things out of there, you can add some power to it, but if you pull that defuel out, there you go.
Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah, that's a tough spot on them, right? Awesome, man. What advice do you think we should be giving to guys who just bought a truck and they know that they want to upgrade something in the trans? We went over some of those basics. What do you want to tell that guy? What's really important for that guy to remember as he owns this truck for the next 15 years?
Yeah. So listen, it's all about responsibility. Driving, as you say, don't drive it like a dick. Okay. If you drive it like a dick, it's going to cost you. Okay. The more you floor it, the more you're going to be inside that trans. Okay. And the motor, listen, motor, turbos, fuel system, it all has, the trans is the one that usually gets screwed up the most, the earliest, but all that stuff does, put additional wear on other components. So it's all about the driver to start with, and also, we had a lot of calls from people that buy the wrong truck for the wrong application. And what I mean by that is people that, there's a lot of people that haul 4-car haulers behind these Dodges, and they're 25,000, 30,000, 35,000, way past the towing limitations of that truck. Okay. We're not even close. All right. That's a medium duty truck. There's a reason why there's a medium duty truck, a light duty truck, like the 1 tons, and then why there's your 2 and 3 ton trucks, your mid-sized trucks. It's because those loads, these trucks can't handle it. So buy the right truck for the application. If you're going to be doing, hot shotting and you're going to be pulling 25 to 30,000 pounds every day, a 1 ton Dodge Ram is not the way to go. Okay. That's not really the greatest truck for you, but don't be upset if you do that you're going to have issues with it. So pick the right truck for the application, drive it responsibly, and other than that, if you're going to do tuning, make sure you pick a reputable tuner. Don't just go to your local diesel shop and let them pick whatever tuner they want for you. Do your research and really pick a good tuner who's been around for a long time. That's not just about making the most power. That makes a good, clean tune that will make your truck run well and has the trans tuning to go with it. And that is really all you can do other than, just be a sensible driver.
I like that. I think that's good stuff, man. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think you've definitely helped out with educating our listeners more and more about the 68 RFE. Would love to have you back in the future, and we'll talk about this again. For today, guys, this has been Paul Wilson. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast.
A 48 that can hold 1,500 horsepower. Yeah, we all can, but it's not going to last that long.